Tantor Audio presents The Sound of Music Story. How a beguiling young novice, a handsome Austrian captain, and 10 singing Von Trapp children inspired the most beloved film of all time. By Tom Santopietro. Narrated by Eric Michael Summerer. 1. A very good place to start. I guess we did do something rather good. Julie Andrews to Christopher Plummer, in Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer, A Reminiscence. June 4th, 1964. Julie Andrews was freezing. If this was spring weather in the Alps, what was it like in February? With the sun rarely bothering to appear, weather continued to run roughshod over location shooting on The Sound of Music, and the unceasing rain had left one very small, unpaved road as the only way anyone could reach Mielvik in southern Bavaria for the filming of the movie's title song. Which was precisely why the cold but ever-cooperative Andrews found herself arriving at the scenic meadow location by means of a decidedly unglamorous Jeep. Problems with the Jeep, however, paled in comparison to the logistics involved with the rental of the helicopter that would swoop down to film Andrews as she launched into the world-famous title song. Helicopter rentals were expensive, very expensive, and with the 20th Century Fox front office firing off memos to director-producer Robert Wise to rein in the over-budget, much-delayed filming, even the perpetually calm director felt the strain of completing the elaborate sequence. With only the first half of the number requiring the use of the helicopter, as soon as the shot was captured, the pilot would instantly fly to Ober-Salzberg for the filming of the movie's finale, the Von Trapp family's escape over the Alps into Switzerland. There was no money for even one more day's helicopter rental. The ever-professional Andrews, a seasoned showbiz veteran at a mere 28, took an extra moment to prepare herself for the carefully staged rendering of the title song. This was no ordinary musical number, no song and dance routine laid down in the carefully controlled confines of the studio. Instead, in order to convey the sense of open-air freedom envisioned by Wise and screenwriter Ernest Lehman, a helicopter with storyboard artist Maurice Zuberano on board would swoop in to film Andrews as she began her lilting vocal. With the helicopter weighed down by bulky equipment and cameraman Paul Beeson strapped precariously onto the side of the craft, the shot would prove difficult in execution and potentially thrilling. Wise and cinematographer Ted McCord knew that this opening not only had to look right, but would also establish the musical vocabulary for the entire film. If viewers did not accept the convention of Maria singing to herself while alone in the mountains, what would they ever make of a 10-minute montage set to the childlike Do-Re-Mi? Wise had spent hours considering countless possible camera movements for this opening, only to discard every last one of them in favor of an overhead shot. Still, he hesitated. It would read on screen just like the start of his own Academy Award-winning West Side Story, which began with a swooping camera that picked up dancers silhouetted against the New York City landscape. Well, the director figured, maybe it wasn't original, but at least he was stealing from himself. McCord would be photographing the Alps, God's country, and the scene cried out for an omniscient, all-seeing, from-the-sky approach, which is why the 60-year-old Wise found himself perched halfway up a tree, waiting for the precise combination of light and wind speed that would allow Andrews to burst forth, spinning, into the title song. But first, the shot had to be lined up and framed. There couldn't be the hint of another human being in sight. Postulant Maria Rayner, momentarily freed from the stifling abbey, was singing precisely because she was basking in glorious solitude with nature. Andrew's slight figure would land smack in the middle of the frame, a speck against the wide open spaces until the helicopter zoomed in closer, still closer, and then, from his perch halfway up the tree, Wise called out, "Ready? Roll camera." Camera operator, soundman, and loader replied, "Roll camera. Speed. Scene 1, take 1. After the slate was clapped directly in front of the lens, Robert Wise paused momentarily and then commanded, "Action!" all eyes swiveled toward Julie Andrews, and waited. Until everyone realized that Julie could not hear any of that traditional start-of-scene checklist over the noise of the approaching helicopter. Time to regroup. Choreographer Mark Bro would now bellow, "Go!" into his bullhorn. Andrews would charge forward, walking quickly in time to the music, until at exactly the right moment, she'd lean into her opening hillside twirl. Ready? Camera running up to speed, scene slated, and once again, action! Andrews strode purposefully across the meadow, throwing herself into a full-bodied twirl, arms outstretched as if to embrace the entire world, and launched into the film's opening words. The hills are alive. Gone was the song's introductory verse, beginning with the pensive, "My day in the hills has come to an end, I know." Instead, bam, right into the chorus, and right into Rodgers and Hammerstein's uncanny mix of music and faith. The song continued, and 30 seconds later there was Julie wanting to sing through the night, like a lark who is learning to pray. Uh-oh, a praying bird? Was this all going to be too saccharine? Maybe. But thanks to St. Augustine, wasn't one of the Von Trapp family sayings, "When you sing, you pray twice"? But for now there was trouble. Big trouble. And not with Andrews' performance. No matter the take, she lip-synced with pinpoint accuracy to her pre-recorded vocal. The problem lay with the helicopter. With the nominal camera operator refusing to hang out of the plane, British cinematographer Paul Beeson assisted Wise and McCord by operating the camera himself while strapped to the side of the craft. The only way to capture the sought-after shot of Julie Andrews skimming along the meadow without the shadow of the craft falling on the ground. But each time the craft circled back to its starting position for another take, the force of the craft's downdraft proved so strong that Andrews found herself knocked over, sprawled in the grass while trying to avoid the mud. Pulling grass out of her hair and off her costume, makeup adjusted yet again, she would stride, twirl, sing, and once more find herself on the ground. Having been knocked down on fully half of the 10 takes, even the placid Andrews finally got so angry she yelled, "That's enough!" Yell she did, but even Ethel Merman herself couldn't have been heard over the sound of the helicopter. And the pilot interpreted his star's hand signals asking him to please make a wider turn as a thumbs-up gesture of, "You're doing great, let's go for one more." Was this any way to begin a multi-million-dollar musical? As it turned out, yes, and then some. Wise, McCord, and Lehman had, in tandem with musical maestro, associate producer Saul Chaplin, and co-choreographers Mark Bro and Dee Dee Wood, worked to finesse every last phrase of this song. Yet here they were, in the 3rd month of shooting, and one question still lay over the entire enterprise. Could any of this really work? Would people buy a nun bursting into song? And in the opening shots of an $8 million widescreen Todd A.O. stereophonic sound production, no less? People expected reality from their movies now. Foreign films and the marked relaxation of production code taboos had changed the very nature of moviegoing. Religious pictures were no longer in vogue, and musicals had fallen out of favor. How was any of this going to be received? As it turned out, with a worldwide fervent devotion, 5 Academy Awards, vitriolic critical disdain, and a cultural impact that continues to resonate some 5 decades after the film's initial release. But for now, Julie Andrews just needed to pick herself up, dust herself off, and try her damnedest to channel the life force that was Maria Augusta Kuchera von Trapp, a woman whose complex real-life backstory made the Maria von Trapp found in The Sound of Music appear to be, well, Mary Poppins. A nun turned governess, Maria von Trapp had married her naval hero employer, instantly inherited his 7 children, given birth to 3 more, pushed the entire family to international singing stardom, outwitted the Nazis, emigrated to America, and morphed into a combination of Austrian relief dynamo, lodge owner, missionary, entrepreneur, loving family matriarch, and occasionally, family dictator. It all played out like a real-life fairy tale, and by the time Maria von Trapp died in 1987 at the age of 82, thanks to The Sound of Music, she had been turned into nothing less than a secular saint. Sainted not by her own claims, though she hardly shunned the attention, but by the millions around the globe who wanted to believe that someone, anyone, could be as good as the Maria von Trapp glimpsed 40 feet high on the screen in the utterly winning persona of Julie Andrews. Maria von Trapp, they reasoned, was proof positive that something good did indeed still exist in the ever-changing, ever-frightening world of the 20th century. Was she really so good, so, well, perfect? In the words of the John Ford Western masterpiece, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, when the legend becomes fact, print the legend. 2. How do you solve a problem like... I realized when I was a little girl that to get her attention you really had to engage her. She had done these tremendous things in her life, met presidents and kings, and I could tell that she didn't have time for a lot of details. Maria von Trapp's granddaughter, Elizabeth. Vanity Fair, June 1998. The one overwhelming irony lying at the heart of The Sound of Music's immutable status as a touchstone of childhood innocence is that Maria herself had anything but a storybook childhood. Far from security and happiness, Maria's formative years featured insecurity, neglect, and ofttimes downright cruelty. Born on a train bound for Vienna on January 26, 1905, Maria was only 3 years old when her mother died. After first living with a father who was unable or unwilling to take care of her, the youngster was sent to live with foster parents. When, after her father died in 1914, and 9-year-old Maria was forced to live with a relative known as Uncle Franz, the darkest years of her life ensued. Far from providing a welcoming home, the tyrannical Franz, a socialist and anti-Catholic atheist, had little time for his young charge, and, as detailed in Maria's decades later autobiography, often beat her. Small wonder, then, that Maria's youngest child, Johannes, the 10th and final von Trapp child, born in 1939, has publicly stated that his complex mother's exceedingly unhappy childhood had left her with insecurities that plagued her all of her life. Figuring that education could provide a way out of her unhappy circumstances, Maria worked to put herself through Vienna's State Teachers' College for Progressive Education. It was during those years that she began to spend increasing amounts of time wandering in the beautiful, mountainous Austrian countryside. These solitary journeys provided Maria with the sense of freedom and peace missing from her childhood, while also providing an ideal outlet for her boundless energy. And energy she had. To burn. It's easy for audiences accustomed to the Maria von Trapp found in the figures of the trim Julie Andrews or the petite Mary Martin, who originated the role of Maria in the Broadway production of The Sound of Music, to forget the fact that Maria was a substantial woman whose sturdy frame proved ideal for her mountainside forays. Forthright, indeed blunt, and the possessor of a booming laugh, Maria remained a formidable figure well into her dotage, a no-nonsense, frequently tough woman full of boundless energy who registered as a rounder, Austrian version of Katharine Hepburn and her all-American no-nonsense practicality. As to how Maria's life morphed from an unhappy childhood to that of a would-be nun, the answer, in Maria's view, lay in divine revelation. While still a teenager, she had joined a hiking group, and it was her suggestion that the club hike high into the Alps, to regions where snow remained even in summer. Surrounded by the literally breathtaking scenery, suddenly it occurred to me, all this, God gives to me. What can I give him? I decided to go into a convent which has perpetual enclosure. It was this revelation, combined with a Palm Sunday service she attended while studying at college, that led her to the Abbey upon graduation. Expecting nothing more from the Palm Sunday service than a chance to hear the music of Bach that she loved, Maria found something quite different. Now, I had heard from my uncle that all of these Bible stories were inventions and old legends, and that there wasn't a word of truth in them. But the way this man talked just swept me off my feet. I was completely overwhelmed. Convinced that she would find the love and security so lacking in her everyday life within Abbey walls, Maria traveled to Salzburg. Located between Munich and Vienna, and famed as the home of Mozart, Salzburg had existed as an independent church-state for more than 1,000 years before joining Austria in 1816. Perhaps with this history in mind, upon her arrival, Maria, in an extraordinary display of naivete, simply asked the first policeman she encountered for the name of the strictest abbey in all of Salzburg. Nürnberg Abbey, the answer came back. Founded in AD 719, Nürnberg, Nun Mountain, which is situated on an overlook outside of the city proper, was more than the strictest abbey in the area. It was also the oldest. After walking to the abbey, Maria announced that she wished to join the novitiate, and after meeting with the mother abbess, found herself beginning the life of a novice at age 19. Says youngest child Johannes, "She did everything 100%. Having found a religious belief in her late teens, after an hours-long confession, she wanted to dedicate her life to God." In her autobiography, and of course in both the stage and film versions of The Sound of Music, that 19-year-old novice stands front and center throughout the life of the entire abbey. Such star-like stature may well have been embellished in recall by Maria herself. In an amusing anecdote recounted by Sound of Music screenwriter Ernest Lehman, when Lehman and the film's then-director William Wyler went to speak with the mother abbess in 1963, with the aim of gathering background information about Maria, the mother abbess, in Lehman's recall, reacted as if to say, "Who's Maria?" The Reverend Mother hardly remembered who Maria was. I think Maria exaggerated her importance at the abbey enormously in the story. In fact, the mention of Maria von Trapp could still cause decidedly mixed emotions on the part of Salzburg natives, with some going so far as to deny she had ever entered the novitiate at Nürnberg. Peter Husty, the head of exhibitions at the Salzburg Museum, went on record as suggesting that Maria's time at the abbey may have been grossly exaggerated, or perhaps even non-existent, calling her relationship to Nürnberg Abbey a little strange. Pointing out that she had been neither a teacher nor a nun, he emphasized the fact that unlike other novitiates, Maria left no trace at the abbey. No record of her birth, her mother or her father. In his words, she resembled a will-o'-the-wisp. Husty's viewpoint would seem undercut merely by the fact that when the family traveled to Salzburg in 1950, Maria held a personal reunion with the mother abbess. What was undoubtedly true, however, was that Maria was far more enthralled with the beautiful countryside outside of Salzburg than she was with life in the abbey. Possessed of great natural beauty, ringed by snow-capped mountains, and nestled in Austria's Lake District, Salzburg, or more particularly the surrounding environs, provided a setting in which Maria immediately felt at home. Escaping to the mountains every chance she had, Maria first bent and then broke the strict rules of the abbey. As the song, "How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria," would have it, she actually did whistle and sing within the abbey walls, and the details of her personality paint her as a remarkably unpromising candidate for the quiet life of a nun in a cloistered abbey. Tales abounded of one nun who had not looked out the window at the outside world in 50 years. 50 years? Maria couldn't last 15 minutes without looking out of the window to drink in the surrounding natural beauty. Penance for looking out the window took the form of kissing the floor, and Maria would simply save time by kissing the floor first and then look out the window. This action found its way into The Sound of Music via Maria's confession regarding Sister Bertha. Rather than follow Sister Bertha's instruction that she kiss the floor after committing a transgression, she figured she would break another rule sooner rather than later, so saved time by kissing the ground at the mere approach of Sister Bertha. In the words of Johannes von Trapp, "My mother was absolutely unsuited for a contemplative life in the abbey. I suspect the nuns were happy when the position opened up in our father's house." Nonnberg would never be quite the same again, thanks to the unruly Maria, who claimed that the nuns found her too coarse. "I had no manners. I was more boy than girl." She was not officially asked to leave the abbey, but it was thought that perhaps some time away might prove beneficial. Given her background as a teacher, she was deemed just the right candidate to tutor Captain Georg von Trapp's young daughter Maria. Maria's suitability as a teacher might have been recalibrated if the captain had ever been able to hear the Sound of Music's assistant director Georg Steinitz, who held a nodding acquaintance with her. Maria had taught Steinitz's mother before entering the abbey, and in Georg's chuckling recall, his mother termed Maria an awfully strict person, a dominating person. "My mother felt her religious beliefs were close to what we would today call fanatical." A captain in the Austrian Navy, and a decorated hero from his service during the First World War, by this time Georg von Trapp had suffered monumental losses in both his private and professional lives. When Austria lost the war, it lost its entire coastline, and his job as a naval captain ceased to exist. Georg then lost his wife, Agatha Whitehead, to scarlet fever in September of 1922, leaving him sole parent to 7 children: Rupert, Agatha, Maria, Werner, Hedwig, Johanna, and Martina. Although well off financially, it had in fact been wife Agatha whose money buoyed the family's fortune. Her grandfather had invented the modern torpedo. Georg was overwhelmed with his duties as a single parent and looking for assistance. While both the screen and stage versions of The Sound of Music depict Maria as governess to all 7 children, she was hired simply as a tutor to young Maria, whose own bout with scarlet fever had left her too weak to walk the 4 miles to school every day. Perhaps because young Maria spent more time with her 21-year-old tutor than any of the other 6 von Trapp children, she was able, late in life, to offer up the sharpest, most clear-eyed assessment of her tutor-turned-stepmother. She needed, all the time, excitement, so she created excitement. Sometimes it was too much for us, but she was a leader. Maria's description of her appearance on the day of her arrival at the villa in Aigen in late summer of 1926 seems to mirror the film's depiction of a satchel-swinging, guitar-toting Julie Andrews so accurately that it seems to have directly inspired the film's costume designer, Dorothy Jeekins. Wrote Maria, "My satchel looked exactly like the bag of a horse and buggy doctor." Even Maria's unattractive dress in the film, "The poor didn't want this one," seems to have been inspired by Maria's actual garment, said daughter Maria. "She had a horrible dress on." As to the actual first meeting between Maria and the von Trapp family, it was, in her recollection, both low-key and not markedly different from how it is depicted in the film. The captain executed a slight bow toward Maria, took out a whistle, and blew signals to summon his 7 children, who ranged in age from 4 to 14. In contrast to the film's depiction of a whistle-blowing martinet, Captain von Trapp actually used the bosun's whistle only to locate his children on the grounds of his rather large estate. But the 7 children really did wear sailor suits, and for moviegoers around the world who carry the image of 7 children summoned by their father's whistle marching down the stairs to meet their new governess, Maria's recall of the event matches the film in surprisingly close fashion. Led by a sober-faced young girl in her early teens, an almost solemn little procession descended step by step in well-mannered silence. 4 girls and 2 boys, all dressed in blue sailor suits. So ingrained was this childhood training of responding to signals that until the day she died at age 99, daughter Maria retained the ability to play every one of the 7 signals. In Agatha's recollection, "We loved our signals." In reality, Georg was a warm and loving, if somewhat overwhelmed, father. It was actually Maria herself, called Gustel by the children, with her emotionally stunted upbringing, who needed thawing. Starved for affection, a woman/child who had literally grown up without being kissed, she found herself willing putty in the hands of the youngest children. For those who find the film's connection between governess and children too precious for words, The reality actually proved even more deeply emotional. I grew up without being kissed, and then I came here to this house, and one of the little ones, Johanna, she was 7 years old, she spontaneously came up to me one day, put her hands around my neck, and kissed me. I remember the sensation very well. It was the first conscious kiss of my life. Small wonder, then, that Maria later wrote in her autobiography, "Only one thing is necessary to be happy, and that one thing is not money, nor connections, nor health. It is love." If it is a universal truth that every person alive has at one time or another felt misunderstood, underappreciated, or in need of love, then in Maria's very real recollection of Johanna's kiss lies a key to the film's extraordinary success. More than the romance between Maria and the captain, the love story at the heart of The Sound of Music is the one between Maria and the children. Indeed, Maria herself publicly and repeatedly acknowledged that she fell in love with the children quickly, but only grew to love Georg after their marriage. In that light, it makes sense that the captain's marriage proposal proved far more prosaic in real life than in the film's depiction of a moonlit song in a romantic waterside gazebo. As related by her granddaughter, Maria was standing on a stepladder polishing a chandelier when the children ran into the room crying out, "Papa says he will marry you!" In the recollection of Agatha von Trapp, her father asked her, "Do you think I should marry Gustl? You know, she's quite pretty." Agatha answered, "I think if it is the will of God, then you should marry her." It was, in fact, Agatha who late in life offered the most judicious explanation of Maria's marriage to Georg. Did Georg love Maria at the time of the marriage? Agatha responded thoughtfully, "I can't say I know it or I don't know it, but since he did what he did, he must have liked her. But the way I saw it, I think she was providential, to be our second mother." Said third oldest child, Maria, "When she first came, it was heaven on earth. We took to her quickly. She sang, she knew new songs. But I wanted Maria to stay a bigger sister. I didn't want my father to marry her. I loved my mother so much I didn't want him to marry again ever, but that was not possible. We never talked about this, of course. We just let it happen." If in the film Maria is thrilled when the captain finally declares his love, in real life her reaction proved far less sanguine. After the Mother Superior told Maria that marriage to the captain and mothering his 7 children represented the will of God, Maria found, "All my happiness shattered, and my heart, which had so longed to give itself entirely to God, felt rejected." First came a marriage proposal received in the middle of doing housework, not from one's intended, but rather from his children. Next, the prospective bride displayed a less than thrilled reaction at the very prospect of marriage. Not exactly the stuff of Rodgers and Hammerstein songs. But the magic of any tale lies in the way it is told, and in the decades later hands of Rodgers, Hammerstein, Wise, and Lehman, the lives of Maria and Georg von Trapp were turned into popular art that appealed to the entire world. Did the family only begin singing after Maria arrived on the scene? The actual chronology here becomes a little fuzzy. It is unquestioned that Maria brought a guitar with her. But while some recollect that the children were already singing before Maria's arrival, in Maria's own words, "They didn't sing. I couldn't understand this. It was the first thing we did. We started singing." On the other hand, in daughter Maria's recollection, the Von Trapp villa was hardly the dour, musicless atmosphere depicted in the film. "Sometimes our house must have sounded like a musical conservatory. You could hear us practice piano, violin, guitar, cello, clarinet, accordion, and later recorders." Agatha von Trapp, in fact, specifies that Father Georg was very musical, teaching Rupert and Maria the accordion, Johanna the violin, and Agatha herself the guitar. There was, in her recollection, no question about it. Singing and the playing of instruments began long before the arrival of Maria. To the contrary, it was Gustl, she stressed, who joined in with an already singing family. Thanks to our father, we already had a repertoire by the time Gustul arrived in our home.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?